The sound of a suitcase zipper is a small, mundane noise. But at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, it's the sound of the world ending. I lay perfectly still in our king-sized bed, the side where he slept already growing cold, and listened to the methodical, unhurried sounds of my husband, Mark, leaving me. There were no slammed doors, no raised voices, no final, dramatic pronouncements. Just the soft thud of a car door closing, the engine purring to life, and the slow fade of his taillights down our rain-slicked street. He walked out without looking back. The silence he left behind was the loudest sound I had ever heard. We had been together for 10 years, a decade. We built a life I believed was unshakable. We had 2 beautiful children, a dog, a mortgage, and a shared history etched into the very walls of our home. I was Lena, the reliable one, the architect-turned-stay-at-home mom who kept the universe of our family spinning. He was Mark, the ambitious commercial real estate broker, always chasing the next big deal. I thought our partnership was the deal of a lifetime. The signs, in retrospect, were painted in neon. The late nights that grew later, the new, expensive cologne, the way his phone, which once lay screen up on the coffee table, was now a secret he kept in his pocket, screen down. When I asked, gently, if everything was okay, he'd pat my hand and say, "Just a tough quarter, Lena. You wouldn't understand the pressure. You wouldn't understand." A phrase that became a wall between us, brick by condescending brick. The final conversation, when it came, was over a dinner I had spent hours preparing, his favorite beef bourguignon. He pushed the food around his plate. "I'm not happy, Lena," he said, his voice flat, as if he were commenting on the weather. The fork froze halfway to my mouth. What do you mean?" "I mean this." He gestured vaguely around our home, at the crayon drawings taped to the fridge, the Lego fortress in the corner, at me. "This isn't what I want anymore. I feel trapped, stalled." My heart was a frantic bird beating against my ribs. "We can fix this, Mark. We can go to counseling. We can find a way." "There's someone else," he interrupted, his gaze finally meeting mine. There was no shame in his eyes, only a cold, resolute finality. "Her name is Chloe. She's an associate at the firm. She understands my world." Chloe, a name with the sharp, brittle sound of breaking glass. 24 years old, I would later learn. Ambitious, unencumbered. He moved out that night. He left me with a sleeping 7-year-old daughter who still believed in fairy tales and a 5-year-old son who asked for his daddy every morning for a month. He left me with a house that suddenly felt cavernous and empty. He left me with a shattered heart and a quiet, simmering fury that began to burn away the grief. The divorce was swift and brutal. His lawyer, a shark in a Brioni suit, painted me as a dependent, a woman who had chosen to opt out of her career. My contributions, managing our lives, raising his children, supporting his ascent, were dismissed as lifestyle choices. He fought for minimal alimony and child support, leveraging his knowledge of my potential earning capacity from a decade ago. The man I had built a life with was now using the blueprint of that life against me. In the end, he got what he wanted: his freedom, his youthfully optimistic girlfriend, and a significantly larger portion of our assets. I got the house, which was now a mausoleum of memories, primary custody of our children, and a settlement that felt like a severance package for a job I'd been fired from. For months, I was a ghost. I moved through the motions of motherhood, a smile plastered on my face for my children, while inside I was crumbling. I felt old, used, and discarded. The world saw a divorced mom in her mid-30s. Mark saw a chapter of his life he had neatly closed. But he had underestimated the woman he left behind. He forgot that before I was a mother, before I was a wife, I was Lena Petrova, one of the most promising architectural minds in my graduating class. He forgot that I had an eye for structure, for foundation, for seeing the potential in something everyone else overlooked. The turning point came during a playdate at a friend's house. Her husband, a financial analyst, was ranting about the market. "The only sure thing right now is commercial real estate," he said, scoffing at the TV. "It's a bloodbath. Good properties are being offloaded for pennies on the dollar by people who can't see the long game." A single, clear thought cut through the fog of my despair. Mark's world is collapsing. That night, after I put the kids to bed, I didn't cry. I opened my old laptop. I logged into the financial portals I hadn't accessed in years. My divorce settlement, while feeling small to my wounded pride, was not insignificant. It was a seed, a very, very angry seed. I started researching. I looked into the firms that were struggling, and there it was like a beacon, the building that housed Mark's prestigious brokerage, Summit Partners. It was a sleek, 6-story glass tower in the heart of the financial district. His pride and joy. The address was on every one of his business cards, and it was owned by a holding company that was drowning in debt, desperate to liquidate assets. A plan, cold, audacious, and beautiful in its symmetry, began to form in my mind. It was so much more than just buying a building. It was about reclaiming power. It was about architecture. He had walked out without looking back, so I would build a future he couldn't possibly ignore. I would become the foundation upon which his professional life stood. And I would make sure he saw my name on the deed every single day for the rest of his life. The plan that crystallized in my mind that night was not born of hysterical rage, but of a cold, meticulous calculus. This would not be a messy, emotional confrontation. It would be a corporate takeover, a hostile acquisition of the very ground beneath his feet. He had treated our marriage like a failing business to be liquidated. I would treat his professional sanctuary as a distressed asset to be acquired. My first move was one of pure intelligence. I needed to understand the playing field better than he did. Mark had always talked shop at dinner, boasting about deals and name-dropping developers, and I, the attentive wife, had filed it all away. I remembered the name Kensington Holdings, the struggling parent company that owned his building. A deep dive into public records and business databases confirmed it. They were on the brink, hemorrhaging cash after a series of bad investments. Their flagship property, the Summit Tower, was now a millstone around their neck. I couldn't do this as Lena, the scorned ex-wife. I needed a new identity. I became a Lena Petrova, a reclusive Greek shipping heiress looking to diversify her portfolio into stable American real estate. I created a professional email, a sleek, minimalist website for a shell company I named Eidos Holdings. Eidos meaning eagle in Greek. I would be the eagle, circling high above, unseen, until the moment I swooped down. My greatest ally in this deception was my own invisibility. For 10 years, Mark had made me feel small, telling me I wouldn't understand the complexities of his world. That very dismissal was now my supreme advantage. No one in the commercial real estate world knew me. I was a ghost. I reached out to Kensington Holdings through a blind broker, expressing Eidos Holdings' interest in a discreet, all-cash purchase of the Summit Tower. The response was immediate and desperate. They invited Ms. Pappas to make an offer. This was the first major hurdle. My divorce settlement was substantial, but not by a downtown skyscraper substantial. It was, however, substantial down payment substantial. I needed a partner. I reached out to the one person from my past who might both understand my vendetta and see the financial sense in it. Professor Alastair Finch, my gruff, brilliant, and fiercely loyal mentor from architecture school. I met him in his book-cluttered office, the scent of old paper and pipe tobacco a comforting echo of my former self. I laid out my plan, not hiding the personal motive, but emphasizing the financial opportunity, a prime property at a fire sale price. He listened, steepling his fingers, his sharp eyes missing nothing. "Lena," he rumbled, using my real name, "this is audacious. It's also borderline insane, and I haven't been this intrigued in a decade." He agreed to become a silent partner, providing the bulk of the capital in exchange for a majority stake on one condition. I would be the managing partner, the public face of Eidos. "This is your design," he said. "You should see it built." The negotiations were a masterclass in psychological warfare, fought from the quiet of my home office, often with a child sleeping in the next room. I, as a Lenny, was cool, uninterested, constantly citing other, more attractive opportunities. They, Kensington, were frantic. We whittled the price down to a number that made Professor Finch chuckle over the phone. "You've just robbed them, Lena. Beautifully done." The day of the closing, I dressed in a sharp, tailored black suit I hadn't worn in years. I looked in the mirror and saw not a betrayed wife, but a CEO. I met the Kensington lawyers in a sterile conference room. My hand did not tremble as I signed the documents that transferred the deed of the Summit Tower to Ito's Holdings. I was now the owner of the building that housed my ex-husband's company. The first month of ownership was a silent one. I instructed the property management company we retained to conduct routine, minor maintenance, things Mark would notice but not alarm him. A new landscaping crew, an upgraded security system at the main entrance. I wanted him to feel a subtle shift, a change in the atmosphere he couldn't quite pinpoint. Then I initiated Phase 2. The building's lobby was dated, a relic of the early 2000s. As the new owner, I had every right to modernize it. I drafted the plans myself, pouring all my thwarted architectural passion into the designs. It was to be sleek, modern, and minimalist. And front and center, behind the new reception desk, would be a massive backlit onyx wall with the Ito's Holdings logo and the words AETOSHOLDINGS PROPRITORS engraved in stark silver lettering. The construction began on a Monday. I received a frantic, bewildered email from Mark sent to the generic Ito's Holdings address. To the management of Ito's Holdings. We were not consulted about these significant renovations to the lobby. The disruption is unacceptable for our client-facing business. We demand an immediate meeting to discuss this. Summit Partners is a premier tenant. I smiled, a genuine, cold smile for the first time in a year. I waited 2 days, then replied, signing as a Lena Petrova, managing partner. Dear Mr. Evans, thank you for your email. Ito's Holdings is committed to enhancing the value and aesthetic of our property. The renovation schedule will proceed as planned. However, we would be happy to meet to discuss your tenancy. Please have your landlord-tenant liaison contact our office to schedule a time. The phone rang 10 minutes later. His number flashed on my screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. He was unraveling. The predictable world he controlled was being controlled by someone else. The meeting was set for a Friday afternoon. I arrived early, sitting in the newly framed-out lobby, watching the workers. I saw him before he saw me. He strode in, face thunderous, his premier tenant ego bruised. He was with a young, blonde woman, Chloe, I presumed. She was clinging to his arm, looking concerned. Then his eyes found me. The confusion on his face was almost comical. It morphed into dawning disbelief, then into pure, unadulterated horror. Lena, he choked out, what are you doing here? I stood, smoothing my suit jacket. Hello, Mark. I'm here for our meeting. I gestured to the construction around us. As the managing partner of Ito's Holdings, I wanted to personally oversee the improvements to our building. I do hope you and your associate will find the new lobby more to your liking. Chloe's jaw dropped. Mark's face went from pale to a blotchy, furious red. You are Ito's Holdings. That's correct, I said, my voice calm, projecting across the noisy space. I bought the building. Every morning when you walk through this door, I want you to remember that you work for me. Your company's success pays my mortgage. Your ambition funds my children's future. You walked out on our family, Mark, but you can never walk out on this. The look on his face, a gut-punched mixture of shock, humiliation, and a flicker of terrified respect, was worth every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. He had tried to make me small. Now I owned the very ground he stood on, and this was only the beginning. The silence that followed my pronouncement was more deafening than any construction noise. Mark stood frozen, his carefully constructed corporate persona shattered into 1,000 pieces. Chloe stared between us, her pretty face a mask of confusion that was rapidly curdling into something uglier. The dawning realization that the powerful man she'd attached herself to was suddenly, mortifyingly vulnerable. I don't understand, Mark finally stammered, his voice stripped of its usual confident baritone. It's quite simple, I replied, my tone as smooth and cool as the onyx wall being installed behind me. Kensington Holdings was liquidating assets. Ito's Holdings made an offer. They accepted. I now own this building, and by extension, I am your landlord. Your lease, which I have reviewed, has precisely 18 months remaining. I saw the calculations flicker behind his eyes, the legal implications, the the financial ones, the sheer humiliating publicity of it all. His firm, Summit Partners, prided itself on its image, on its unshakable foundation. To have it known that his ex-wife, the woman he deemed insufficient for his new life, was now his literal landlady would be a professional death sentence. This is harassment, Lena," he sputtered, finding a shred of his old bluster. I tilted my head, a gesture I'd seen him use 1,000 times to condescend to subordinates. "Is it? Improving a property's value is standard practice. Enforcing lease terms is a landlord's right. If you feel harassed by standard business operations, Mark, perhaps you're in the wrong industry." I let my gaze drift meaningfully to Chloe, who was now pointedly examining her phone, desperate to escape the blast radius. "Or perhaps you've simply forgotten how business is conducted when you're not the one holding all the cards." I turned my back on them then, a deliberate and powerful gesture. "The renovation will be complete in 6 weeks. I trust it will meet your firm's elevated standards. My office will be in touch regarding the lease renewal. Have a productive day." I walked away, the click of my heels on the bare concrete a definitive period to the conversation. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel his stunned, furious gaze burning into my spine. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been inverted. The following weeks were a symphony of quiet, satisfying developments. My first official act as landlord was to commission a stunning, floor-to-ceiling mural for the lobby, a powerful, abstract depiction of a phoenix rising, its colors echoing the Edo's Holdings logo. It was a message, subtle and brutal, that only I would understand. Mark, true to form, tried to fight back. His lawyers sent tersely worded letters, claiming constructive eviction due to the renovation dust and noise. My legal team, paid for by the building's new revenue stream, swatted them away with ease. He attempted to rally other tenants, but they, seeing the significant capital being invested, were thrilled with the upgrades. He was isolated. Meanwhile, I was not idle. Professor Finch, delighted with the initial return on investment, agreed to fund my next venture. Petrova Designs, my own architecture firm. I set up my office on the building's top floor with a panoramic view that dwarfed the one from Mark's office 2 floors below. The irony was a vintage I savored daily. The final piece of my plan fell into place 8 months later, when Mark's lease was due for renewal. The commercial real estate market had tightened significantly. Rents for premium, renovated spaces like mine had skyrocketed. I had him in a vice. The meeting was held in my new office. Mark arrived alone this time, his shoulders set in a defensive line. He looked older, the stress lines around his eyes more pronounced. "Lena," he began, attempting a tone of weary reasonableness. "Let's be adults about this. We have a history. We have children together. Surely we can come to a reasonable agreement on the lease." I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers just as Professor Finch had. "This is me being an adult, Mark. This is business. And the business reality is that the market rate for this space has increased by 40%. He paled. 40%, that's outrageous. You'll bankrupt me." "Bankruptcy is a business risk," I said calmly. "One you were apparently willing to let me face when you fought for minimal support. I am offering you a new 5-year lease at the current market rate. It's a generous offer, considering I could easily find another tenant at this price." He stared at me, and for the first time I saw not anger, but a flicker of genuine fear. The empire he had chosen over his family was crumbling, and I was the one holding the wrecking ball. "Or," I said, letting the word hang in the air, "there is another option." His eyes narrowed. "What option?" "I will renew your lease at a 20% increase," I said, "on one condition." I paused, ensuring I had his complete, terrified attention. "You resign from Summit Partners. You leave the firm you built in my building. You walk away and you find a new office in a different city, far away from me and from our children's daily lives. You can have your freedom, Mark, the freedom you wanted so badly, but you can't have it here." The color drained completely from his face. It was an impossible choice, financial ruin or professional exile. He had walked out without looking back, and now I was giving him a chance to do it again, this time with the door hitting him on the way out. He sat in silence for a long time, the hum of the city below the only sound. Finally, he slumped in his chair, all the fight gone out of him. "You've won, Lena," he whispered, his voice hollow. "No, Mark," I corrected him gently, standing up to look out over the skyline, my skyline. "I've just begun to build." He resigned the following week. The news sent shockwaves through the local business community. He and Chloe moved to a different state, his reputation tarnished, his grand ambitions reduced to a footnote. I stood in my lobby a month later, the finished Phoenix mural glowing behind me. My daughter held my hand, pointing at the beautiful bird. "It's like you, Mommy," she said. "You rose from the ashes." I squeezed her hand, looking around at the empire I had reclaimed from the ruins of a broken promise. He had walked out, thinking he was leaving his past behind. But I had ensured that his past became the foundation of a future he could only watch from a distance, a future where he was the one who was finally, and forever, forgotten.